Dp-Capital G here, doing a discussion on a card that I absolutely love this format, and one that I think has a whole bunch of potential, especially coming out of the side deck. I actually think that this card is going to get progressively better as this format moves along, and it is Grave of the Super Ancient Organism. It's a fucking really obscure card. I'll just put that out there now, and it's pretty old. It came out during the 5Ds era in Raging Battle. It was an ultra rare slash ultimate rare, and actually, now that I think about it, I feel like the card has totally never been reprinted, although I've got a couple of copies of it. I played this last year. I used to side it against Necroz, and every single time that I drew it when I was playing Tellarknights, I beat Necroz. It was just a complete blowout of a card, and I really haven't seen that many people in the community talking about this card or really even mentioning it. In fact, Chris from Team Innovation Yu-Gi-Oh! Is the only person who I've ever really seen mention this card, but I think it is really, really good right now. Now, if you don't know what the effect does, it says all face-up level 6 or higher special summon monsters on the field cannot declare an attack or activate their effects. Yeah, it is pretty linear if you really look at it. I believe that, it was supposed to counter the synchro summon mechanic. The problem was, and the reason why I don't think that it saw much play during the 5Ds era, because I played during that entire era and I don't remember ever seeing this card, despite it wasn't ultra rare. Like, I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that Royal Oppression was legal at the time, and Royal Oppression, was obviously a card that could counter, synchros, but then in addition, Royal Oppression could counter things like Dark Arm. So it's like Royal Oppression was just a better card back then, and also it was actually pretty difficult to keep Floodgates on the field during the 5Ds era because Heavy Storm was legal and Giant Tornado was legal as well. So it's just, there was so much fucking spell and trap removal, in addition, like Cold Wave. So people were hesitant to put a bunch of cards on the board as far as like back row and whatnot. But when you look at this card in the context of today, it's actually really, really solid. I told you guys last year that regional I played Tellers, I went 7-2. I played this against Necroz, and every single time I drew it against Necroz, I beat them because if you think about it in the context of a ritual deck, well, I mean, you can't normal summon ritual monsters, so every single ritual monster has to be special summoned. So when you look at a deck like Necroz, it stopped Valkyries, it stopped Gungnir, it stopped Decisive Armor, it stopped Brionic, which they don't summon that much, but every time if they wanted to summon that, obviously it would stop that as well. It stopped the Necroz of Trishula, which was a really big one. But even though Necroz is dead and gone, we do have a ritual deck that is basically, it's making some waves right now, and that is obviously the Herald of Perfection Cyber Angel hybrid deck. And I mean, this is a deck that would basically lose to this card. If you flip over Grave of the Super Ancient Organism, you shut down Herald of Perfection, you shut down Saphira, and you essentially turn that deck into a ritual deck, or excuse me, a Xyz only deck, where their only tangible way of getting this card off the field generally is going to be using something like Scepter, or using Scepter's effect, or going into like Deltaros. And if you make that deck that linear, it's very, very easy to deal with. This is the thing about this card. It's very linear in design, but you have to think of it in the context of what's popular in the meta right now and what's probably going to become the meta. What are you going to see? Because it's pretty obvious right now, guys, that the format is wide fucking open. I think that House of Champions just uploaded a top 8 regional deck of Yosenju. So I mean, everything in the meta can basically top right now. And if you look at some of the heavy hitters, you think of Blue Eyes White Dragon. That's a deck that doesn't really normal summon its Blue Eyes. So if you happen to flip this over, not just stopping their Synchros, their Spirit Dragons, but just think about if your opponent can't attack with any of their high-level dragon monsters. They can't use, alternative dragon. It just sits on the field, can't do anything, can't activate its effect, can't attack. You think of the Dark Synchro deck. That's another deck where, yeah, they can summon a bunch of cards, but when they really go for the nitty-gritty, when they go for the Synchros and the Triple Omegas, they just don't do anything. Even if your opponent had Triple Omega on you, and you flip this over and they chain the Triple Omega, when the Omegas come back, they're just not going to be able to activate their effects anymore, which means the Omegas aren't really doing anything. It's super good against Yang Zings and DDD. DDD actually like the Synchro and Fusion Summon. I guess what I'm really getting at is this card is the bane of the existence of Rituals, Synchros, and Fusions, because most of these decks that are meta, they want to summon these monsters that are basically high level. You don't see a lot of people, Synchro summoning for like level 4 monsters or Fusion summoning for like level 5. You usually see like really high level monsters like ABC Buster Dragon, although even though I put this card up here, I don't know if I would really side against that because ABC summons, they can Xyz summon a lot easier, and this card is practically useless against Xyz. Now, some of the reasons why I like this card in comparison to some cards that are kind of similar to it. Certain things like lose one turn and skill drain is, for one, this does not let your opponent attack with those monsters, because if you think about it, right, if you flip over skill drain against a lot of meta decks, yeah, it can hurt them, but a deck like Blue Eyes can still just summon a bunch of Blue Eyes and beat the crap out of you. I mean, they're 3,000 monsters, and a lot of times if they have Return of the Dragon Lords, those 3,000 monsters have protection on them, so even if they're not getting effects, they can still just beat the shit out of you with a bunch of big dragons. Same thing with lose return. You know, your opponent synchro summons, or maybe they fusion summon or whatever, and you basically have one turn to kill that damn monster. Otherwise, it can just, you know, be put in attack mode. It can activate its effect. It can just beat the crap out of you. But with Grave of the Super Ancient Organism, A, the monster cannot attack at all. B, it doesn't cost any life points. And C, it still allows you to go ham and do whatever the fuck you want to do. These cards can be somewhat restricting to the decks that play it. If you flip over skill drain, you obviously won't be able to get any effects unless you're playing something weird like Yang Zings and you summon a Baxtia with like, Bixie or something like that. But for the most part, this doesn't really restrict your deck, especially if you're playing an Xyz deck. If you're playing something like Sir Tellarknights, as I did, or if you're playing Burning Abyss or PK Fire, you're playing an Xyz deck. You're not really running any high level monsters outside of, I guess, maybe like Virgil, or, those are monsters coming out of the extra deck. Monarchs is another prime example. Monarchs is a deck that does run a lot of high-level monsters, but they're all tribute summons. So obviously it really wouldn't affect you unless you're, I guess it would stop the monster that you summon with Aether, but that's really only one play that you have to sacrifice. This is an excellent floodgate that a deck like Monarchs can flip over and use against like DDDs, or it can use against like rituals, because I'm not sure that Monarchs would be able to side like anti-spell fragrance against like a ritual deck, because Monarchs themselves want to use a whole bunch of spells. So it seems like that would be kind of a difficult matchup for you decide and whatnot. And even if you look into the future, guys, if you don't think about like how this shuts down Blue Eyes or Dark Synchro, or Metaphos, Yang Zings, even if you're playing against pure Metaphos, all the fusions are like pretty high level except Alcahis. So that's another deck that would get wrecked. Or even like Cyber Angel Herald or whatever. Look at some of the other decks that are about to come out. Dark Lords is the whole deck is basically nothing but like level 7 or higher monsters, and I play Dark Lords a lot. They usually want to summon their cards off of things like Call of the Haunted, Soul Charge. Oh wait, there's not a lot of tribute summoning. Some people use Valhalla. They have their own like spell version of Monster Reborn. This would just completely shut the deck down. Another deck would be Ancient Gears. They're getting a whole lot of support, and Gear Town that allows them to be summoned from the deck. If you flip this over, no attacking, no activating of effects. It pretty much wrecks them. And another thing that I like about this in comparison to these two is, there was always kind of that loophole with skill drain and lose one turn. The fact that your opponent could activate an effect of these, under these cards, and then they could flip the monster face down, or if they removed it from the field or whatever, it wasn't face up, basically the monster effect would still resolve. This is better because it says they can't even activate the monster effect at all. So there's no shenanigans, right? Like, you can't summon a Black Rose Dragon and then try and like Book of Moon it and like nuke the entire board. It doesn't work. Like, as long as this card is on the field, the monsters can't even attempt to activate their effect. So it's like a really, really solid card. So let me know what you guys think. Again, this card is not something you can splash into everything. If you're running a fusion deck, if you're running a ritual deck, or if you're running a synchro deck, this probably is not the card for you. But if you're running like a tribute deck, if you're running Xyz, then this card is super good. Mainly you want to run this in like Xyz based decks. If your deck doesn't special summon at all, or if you're running like Xyz where level doesn't really matter, this is a card that's really good. Very linear, but very good in this meta. Let me know what you guys think of this card. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up, and take care, guys. Subscribe if you have not already.